Hello, I'm MonteCristo, and we're going to talk about Cloud9 and sort of team culture. And on Cloud9, you can see, if you go check out the documentary, that the players are all adapting to this new culture right now. But we think it's really important that we describe exactly what's going on within the team so that everyone has some context for the changes that are being made. So we'll start with you, Gary. Would you mind introducing yourself? Talk about your background and your job with Cloud9.
Yeah, I'm Gary Hoyt. I'm a performance psychologist, and I actually spent the last 24 years of my career in the U.S. Navy, in the military. I was their force level psychologist working on, in large part, performance optimization and assessment and selection to help know who is going to be a solid SEAL and so forth. And so now I'm here at Cloud9, working similarly on performance optimization with our different teams, League of Legends and so forth.
So this is significantly lower stakes, you would say, than your old job. Pretty serious stuff.
Yeah, different stakes, but honestly, performance is performance across any specter. So really trying to help with processes and professionalization, if you will, of effort. And so to me, it's a different culture in some respects. But I think we want to bring that same type of rigor to Cloud9, so forth.
Excellent. Yeah. So, Jack, why did you feel that this change was necessary to bring Gary on and utilize his skills?
Yeah, well, we actually brought Gary on in the middle, I think, of the summer split. When he's coming in, really, we need to kind of assess and understand the way we work. So at that point in time, we're like, hey, Gary, just tear into our culture right now. It was more like, hey, I want you to understand what we're doing, and then when it's right time, start implementing the way we should be working. The reason I wanted to bring someone in, though, is that although our results were pretty good in scrims and that we're pretty good on stage, it was really clear that the team wasn't in sync. There were players that seemed really like they were putting in a ton of effort to get better every week, and there were some other players that seemed to be coasting. And there, you could start to see that there was frustration between those players that were putting in the effort and the players that were coasting. And when the team was getting together to kind of discuss, like, how can they improve, what can they work on, they never really seemed to be coming up with actually any solutions that were functional. They would have this conversation that would spin in circles, and they would walk away, I think, just as frustrated as when they first sat down. So you could start kind of seeing that, hey, this was going to be a problem, and I really wanted Gary to get in there to improve the way we're operating. And where things came to a head was after we were eliminated from Worlds, and I was having my exit interviews with players. It was clear that it was time to rip the Band-Aid off on how we were working, because the way we've been working for years was no longer functioning for us, for the team. And my hardest working players and myself were demanding of a change.
What was it that you wanted to change first and foremost, Jack?
I wanted the team to function as a team and to place like the team as in like the highest priority of their mind and what they wanted to do. And what was happening is you would have situations where we really need to buckle down and work and figure some new things out. But there were a few members that I think when they were feeling that stress, they just, started doing anything other than actually focusing on their job. And because they weren't focusing on actually getting better, that frustration really built up with the other players that were putting in the work. So I needed 5 players that were completely focused on getting this team to be better and to work as a unit to get to those goals. And I didn't want players to be focusing on, I just want to get championships. I just wanted them every single day to come in here to figure out how can they improve personally and how can they improve as a team to get better every single day. You step aside from the ego and just put the team as the team goals as the number one thing they're doing every single day.
Gary, was this the first thing that you wanted to change as well when you came in? And how did you go about that?
Yeah, so this isn't just to blow smoke Jack's way, but frankly, he's a good owner. He's very sensitive to the idea of a system and a culture. And so, one thing that I can bring in is not just individual change, but hopefully corporate organizational change. And what we discussed was that every great culture, every great organization has the ability to take a pause and really look at three main areas typically. And one is your organizational structure, and the second would be certainly your culture, like what is the environment that exists that shapes those behaviors, right, that you want. And the third is your training methodologies. And so we have been looking at really all those three things really across Cloud9, and figure that when you shape those areas, then obviously individual behaviors follow that very culture. A culture of excellence, so that we really love mastery, we love growing, and we are teams that show up with personal ownership. So instead of saying, yeah, I could have done that, but that got in my way, we're instead saying, got it. This is my contribution to my behavior that didn't work. This is what I will do differently next time. And that's really this idea of personal ownership and this love of mastery. And talent development means, as coaches, we don't just say, I need more talent. We actually say, hey, I will engage very heavily in your shaping, your mentoring. I will also expect a lot from you. So you show up prepared and you show up ready. And these types of things are really change kind of a culture, the way a team breathes, the way it thinks, the way it feels like that's how I show up. And so I know that from the military and from other successful teams, and wanted to bring that here. So
Great. So Jack, how is this being implemented? Because you spend a lot of time with the League of Legends team on a day-to-day basis. Can you give me some examples of how this focus has already changed the way the team practices, or the way the team communicates with each other, or the way the team operates daily?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't an easy change, right? It started. We were actually working simultaneously in two different areas. Number one, we had to rebuild the team and find players that from the outset were already putting in the level of effort that we expected that their teammates could respect. Not all the players put in the same amount of effort. So we had to find players that put in the same amount of effort and were willing to buy into a system in this. So I talked with each player, found which players that would buy in and would want to be a part of this system. On the other end, we grabbed all of our staff, our managers, our coaches, and we had them all fly out to LA. Some of the guys were in Korea for their break, and we're like, hey, and we just sat in a room to discuss like how we're going to change our culture to get to the ideals that we want to set for ourselves, to make sure that when the players arrived coming back from their break, all the staff, all the managers, all the coaches were on the same page of how we were going to operate. And we had some individual talks with the players before they even showed up, so they were already personally bought in. So when it all came together for our first boot camp in Korea, it wasn't like we had to like convince these guys to do this. They were already ready to go, and they just hit the ground and just steamed right into the level of effort and the level of expertise, hunger for expertise that we wanted. And it was honestly, it was remarkable. Like the team that we left in Europe and the team that we had in Korea was like a completely different animal. And right from the get-go, you could see it producing fruit in their attitude and the way they came to work every day, and the way they actually were working and understanding like scrim reviews, their desire to get better and having personal and team goals. And it's kind of a contagious like excitement of the players wanting to get better and wanting to be more hungry. And it kind of gets a life of its own, where you just start seeing players showing up early, awake, ready to become better than they were before.
Yeah, that's culture. I mean, that's the ability to say that's what's expected of me, and it's all around me, and that's really what we're trying to set up across Cloud9, organizationally, and certainly with the esports. So
yeah, and I would say like the League of Legends was like the center of this storm, and like and we started with the League of Legends team, added in the academy team. We started like training up our Counter-Strike team on it, and we're spreading it across to all of our employees, so that we're all, as an entire organization, understanding like we're in this boat together. We're all rowing in the same direction to get to that goal.
As it stands right now, the Cloud9 League of Legends team is 4-0, and I think most people would say that they are looking like the best prepared team coming into the spring split. And it's great because they're winning, and it's great because it's just the start of the season, but if they go to Worlds, we're going to be grinding until November, right? So for Gary, how do you keep this level of motivation and this drive for excellence up over the long term across the team?
We are in a process. And so we as a team, as an organization, we want to really love the process of getting better. We want to love mastery. And that being said, 4.0 is great, but it's just an artifact of trying to be prepared. But we really want to be focused on our processes and our growth and our ability to keep learning, keep getting better. So I think teams that get really end state focused, it becomes a problem. And when you've trained in a way that you've seen the contingencies that you might see, like in a game, in the military we say you train like you fight. When you train in a way that you've been able to cover a lot of scenarios, when the game happens, you probably have seen it or seen something akin to that or close to that. So we really want to focus on our training methods. We're happy. I'd rather be 4.0 than 0.4, right? But the bottom line is we're going to keep growing. And so no matter what happens next week in the win column, we want to get better. And teams that continue to get better, they sustain success. That's what we want to be, a sustained winning organization. And that said, we want our focus to be right. So lots of areas that we can look at and I can get into if you'd like. So
I would like. We'll get into the nitty-gritty in a minute.
yeah.
I think it's interesting that you brought up like that we're the best prepared team in the league right now, and I believe we are. The thing is, I've seen the community say, well, it's because this team didn't go to Korea or they've only boot camp for a couple of days. And like the thing is, it's actually that's not correct, because teams like EG were in Korea practicing actually longer than we were. And TSM was in China, and these other teams were out there preparing. They were putting in the work, but I don't think the work they did was efficient. It actually wasn't netting out good results for them, where I think the work that we did was extremely efficient and better prepared us for it, even though we had about the same amount of time as some of these other teams. And the 4.0 is great, right? I mean, as much as like we are focused like on becoming masters of this of our processes, it did feel good because we couldn't ignore that, the community was essentially shitting on us. Like Sven joined our team, and our own fans were like looking to burn down Cloud9, and that hurts. And so some of the guys like on Twitter like were probably getting a little sassy like on social media. But the thing is, like, we need to be constantly focused on how do we get better, how do we get improved. All that stuff is really just a distraction, and I feel that these guys understand that and are going to be focused just as hard tomorrow as they were last week.
I do want to talk about improving the efficiency stuff in just a second, but before we do that, I want to go back and talk about the kind of players that Cloud9 is going to be recruiting, because I think a lot of people are going to be curious about the philosophy, and especially if they, people out there want to be future Cloud9 pro gamers. And I think that from my outside perspective, before it was always Cloud9 is the best at bringing up-and-coming players and making them LCS quality in League of Legends. But let's talk about how that's going to affect, or what your recruiting strategies are, not only for League, but across games right now. Because, for example, in Counter-Strike, you just brought in a team of relative newcomers, including a couple of South African players, which is going to be, I think, a first at this level of professional Counter-Strike. And they weren't very big names. And you're moving away from having some of the biggest names in Counter-Strike on your roster. Was that part of this philosophical change? Were you looking for these grindy players in Counter-Strike that were really dedicated to mastery? Is that how you're going to recruit players going forward?
I think we actually always have recruited that way. And if you look historically, even at Counter-Strike, we weren't the team to ever go out and sign who was ever like the most popular player or performing the best on tournaments for other teams. We have always tried to find the players that were super passionate, hungry, that wanted to put in the effort to get in there. We could see that, hey, this guy's got a tremendous potential, and he wants to really work hard and do better for himself. But I don't think we had we didn't have as refined of a culture in the past on how we would develop that talent. I think we did really well with what we had, but I feel like we're really professionalizing that culture to really get the most of the players that we hire.
I think that character really matters, and that better people are better performers, not just better from a morality, but better from a discipline, from a character perspective. And so, just looking at these young individuals on this team, they're pretty hungry. They want to be a part of something bigger than themselves. And I think we're looking for, you were talking about future recruits, people that really get that they are driven towards something that's a lot bigger than themselves, that we'll fight as a team for each other. So there's a team loyalty, but we will work very hard at trying to accomplish, bigger end states. And part of that is just that we will put in the work, and we'll enjoy the process of getting better. I think that's really important for any team that Cloud9 has. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it doesn't mean that I wouldn't ever pick up whoever is the hottest player in the market, just because they're currently recognized. Like if they have that hunger and they want to be a part of what we're building, then absolutely I'll go pick them up.
But you would say that's the most important part because the philosophy here is that if they have this hunger, you can train them to be a world-class player.
Yeah, I think there's this misconception that I care about the social media following or the streaming following of my players. I actually don't care at all. And yes, some of my players have tremendous following, but I can't think of a single player that I hired when I hired on, they had a huge following. That didn't matter to me. What always mattered to me was they have the drive and hunger to be the best at what they do. And the other stuff just kind of follows along with their success.
I think that just it's funny. Why wouldn't you start with the greatest talent? You should. But talent, that'd be great. But talent is never enough all by itself. Mm-hmm. And so you want to know not only can they do the job, but will they do the job? Will they continue to do it in these certain situations, in that environment? And again, that's from very military, not just can you, but will you? And you try to select people who will. But of course you want to start with the best talent. But lots of times you see the best talented teams don't always win. The best teams actually win. Hopefully best talent plus best team. And so we're working on that team synergy, and that requires people that really get that they get it's not just about me, but about how we get to that end state. So.
Okay, now I want to talk about efficiency, because this is a topic that's always been really near and dear to my heart, because I think in esports, and this is my own pontificating, but I think in esports it's been very difficult because there hasn't been a lot of research done compared to competitive sports about what is the most efficient way to practice. And I think a lot of the reasoning behind that is, in sports, there's a definitive limit to what your body can take in a given day, which means that you literally can't play basketball for 16 straight hours. But anybody almost can play video games for 16 straight hours. And the thing is that good? At what point does your brain go into autopilot? You're not really learning anything from the practice anymore. And I think that because we've been seeing more and more sports psychologists, obviously, and performance coaches enter the space, but for the most part, it's been practice, practice, practice all the time. And I've never thought that was good, but at the same time, we see a lot of the teams that are world champions in this very, very brutal practice schedule. Yeah. So now that we're professionalizing, what are some of the things you've come into esports and noticed about performance, and how are you making Cloud9's practice more efficient?
So I want to correct something you just said, which is, you could play a sport 16 hours a day physically, or maybe you couldn't, but you could in esports. Yes. So that's true, you can, but you're going to have attrition in esports if you look for it, just similar to any other physical aspect.
That would be my assumption as well.
Yep. So one thing that we've really tried to focus on is that more practice is not better practice. Only better practice is better practice. Okay. So more is not always better. Intuitively, it feels better, but if you watch specifically from a cognitive fatigue perspective, we want to be just monster workers. We want to work as hard as anybody out there. But we also want to be not just hard, but smart. And smart is the way that we apply what we're trying to do. And so if you watch, the reason we look at training methodology is really this idea that if you come to Cloud9, you were talking about recruiting earlier, if you come to Cloud9, you're going to get a staff that's really prepared. They're going to show up ready. and they're going to show up doing training that's benchmark focused, that has some rigor to it, that looks at, these are the rules of engagement, this is how we're going to go fight. But also, we're going to learn, and every single player is a leader. So it's not just leadership, but it's leadership by all. Who innovates, who contributes, who says, hey, I'm doing this work to get better. So if you do those types of things, you're actually getting better as a team. You have better practice. Then you can afford to say, we don't need to just keep slogging away, put in more time. We need to push hard in our work, but we need to be smart about it. And so the more effective we are, the better that you can control for some of that cognitive fatigue. But when we talk about cognitive fatigue, think about, I'm a performance psychologist, so the things that make sense to me and our research backed are think about your sleep. And your sleep is absolutely tied into, it's correlated with mental acuity. So you want to have better decision makers, you want to have better, more acute players, cognitively, then you'll make sure that their sleep is online. You'll make sure that their nutrition is getting better. You'll make sure that their physical exercise. Can I be comfortable when I feel uncomfortable? Can I be comfortable in that type of experience? If I am in physical exercise, not huge weights, but just core work, when I can do that, then that translates into playing. And so we're really working from a cognitive perspective about good decision makers and people that have good endurance cognitively, okay? And certainly mental performance, but I can get into that too.
Yeah, let's talk about how this has changed the sort of day-to-day regimen of the team so far. How, when you've been there, Jack, considering you've been here for 7 years, what are you doing differently now on the day-to-day that you weren't doing before?
It's interesting, like, as far as like the actual schedule itself, I think it's really changed all that much. Like we have our morning workout and then our food together and a meeting, and then we do our scrims. That hasn't changed, but I think like the expectation of our players to show up really ready, to really engage, because we have a strength trainer that shows up every morning to work out with the guys. In the past, the guys would like show up a little bit late, not have their water, be wearing flip-flops, like you could clearly tell they didn't get enough sleep. That's, the players themselves, they hold each other accountable to making sure that they show up ready, they've gotten the sleep, they have their water, they're there early, they're engaging with their strength trainer to make, because they're going to be there for that hour. Get the most out of it. Make sure they're, and they're pushing each other to get better. That culture of looking to push themselves to be better and to push themselves to be better, that's different than it was last year. It was like, I felt like last year a lot of the guys were just checking the box. Okay, I did my workout, but they were never really engaged. Or the guys now are really trying to get something out of it.
It's a little more competitive, right?
They're pushing each other. They're pushing me.
Oh, no,
I push them. I push them because we're yeah.
Say that, but
Yeah, I do. But I think it definitely, I think, incentivize you when you see a dude more than twice your age, pushing as hard as you are. It's palpable, the difference in the focus. That's what's different. The schedule is not different. It's that the people there are there because they want to be there. They know they could go anywhere else, but this is where they want to be. They want to be playing with the guys that they're next to, and they want to push themselves to be better. And that's the difference. It's that it's not necessarily the schedule.
Well, the qualitative difference is interesting, as Jack's pointing out, is that, one thought is, I fall asleep, I just fall into bed at 1 a.m. and whatever's left in the night is what I get for sleep. That's kind of passive, right? And we want to be more proactive about that and say, hey, in reality, because they talk about this in the military, in reality, you start your day with sleep. So if I said, hey, I'm getting up at this time, then I start my day at the night before. That's when I start it. So I make sure I start my day with X amount of sleep. That's what I get. So when I get up, I'm ready to hit it. And that's a more proactive way to look at sleep versus this is the only window I ended up with, right? And so we're trying to be more thoughtful about those things, or about nutrition, or about physical exercise. Not trying to make, huge, triathletes, of course not. but we are trying to make sure that people have the stamina, the endurance, the physicality to sit there and the cognitive aspect to do well. So
It's all great when the League of Legends team is doing it and everybody's here in Los Angeles. How are you going to implement this across all of Cloud9's divisions? Are you going to move more people to Los Angeles to be part of this program? Are you expecting players who are elsewhere on the road to adhere to these same type of schedules? What's that going to look like when it hits more than just the LoL team?
I think it's a good question. Like, and we have a Dota team, right? We just recently announced it. They are planning to be to LA. I'm scouting out like locations for them to be close to everybody else now. And as we bring on new teams, I want them to be in LA. The guys that are remote, we're going to be working hard to try to integrate them into this culture, but it's a lot harder when they don't have the same infrastructure at their fingertips to do that. When the guys are on the road, though, we work with nutritionists to figure out what food can they have on the road to kind of mirror what they have here in LA, and we also work with our strength trainers to have like mobile workouts, which are more based on like using bands or their own body weight to get a workout, but they do still work out every single day. So we're still focusing on their sleep, their food, and their workouts while they're on the road.
I think that really kind of points to the idea of the systems you have in place, because you're not always working individually with folks, and so we're still trying to broaden that and work on that with how we do things, what are procedures. And I think it was John Wooden who said this, but he said, champions do not become champions on the court. They're merely recognized on the court, but they become champions in their daily routine. And it really speaks about players decide their future by how they decide their habits. And that's not just players. That can be in marketing. That could be in, any aspect of a company. And so this idea of what kind of routines, what kind of culture, what kind of expectations are set up, who's going to show up, you can start promulgating that across different divisions and across different teams. And then with the right training and coaching and staff and so forth, then players will start to adapt to those things. And so that's how we kind of force multiply, if you will.
You mentioned earlier the mental aspect. What advice have you been giving the players, and how have you been trying to help them with their mental game?
So I think any kind of mental performance, there's 5, 6, 8 different areas, but kind of a classic 4 would be this idea of self-talk. So I'll give the 4: self-talk, visualization, goal setting, right, and arousal control. And just from players, if you go on stage and it's different to play in a practice, and then it's very different to walk on stage depending on the outcomes. So arousal control, just that ability to stay in that sweet spot. So whether it be diaphragmatic breathing or what you say to yourself about going on stage and so forth has a big impact on your physiology and your readiness. I'm ready, I'm fired up, but I'm not overwhelmed, right? And so we do work on those things. We work on self-talk. Not so much what could happen, what might happen, but what I will do, what's in my control. And visualization is a big part of that as well. This idea that, I can see 4 or 5 different successful moves or what might happen and what I can envision, and then what I'm going to do about that. And sometimes those are really helpful in terms of pre-game regimen, pre-game routine, and so forth. So those are some of the kind of the mental stuff that we work on. Some of the advice is just this idea that there's not much in a game that you haven't seen in practice. Why? Let's focus on what you do in practice. We have great rigor. We have great training methodology. We use data, we aggregate data, and we look at things to be more predictive. We have so much stuff going for ourselves. We're going to count on what is working, and then we're going to go implement that, as opposed to showing up to a contest that you're not ready for. So there's lots of things we're building into them so they show up, okay, this is something we do every day. Let's go do it.
A lot of the stuff you're talking about with visualization and mental training are frequent meditative practices as well. And are you introducing any kind of meditative or mental work like that into their regimen in addition to the physical training?
So just starting to work on that with mindfulness and meditation and so forth, and things that they may be able to do as a group for a team dynamic before games, but also individually. Been working with a few individually on that, and just their ability to be very present, to be very focused on where they're at and how they're going to then go perform. And so mindfulness is a great practice for each of them.
So basically, you're just creating a clan of warrior monks now. It's pretty cool. I like it. I like it.
I think across sport, this isn't new to performance psych at all.
Warrior monks are a real thing.
But I mean, if you studied like no kidding war and no kidding combat and war, you have whether it's recognized or not, you have a great thousands of years of history of people who are mentally prepared, who have either kind of vicariously are resilient off each other, and they work off that group dynamic, or they're just able to in turn kind of put themselves in the right place to either lead or to just perform. And we really believe that it's not just leadership, but it's leadership by all. That means if we're all a team, then it's Jack's. He may be a leader as an owner. He's also just straight up a leader as part of a team. And I'm a leader because I have to innovate, I have to show up, I have to contribute, I have to be ready. And all these things build a great team dynamic, but they also give me confidence in my own ability to push forward. So that's important.
It's been 7 years almost, or just over. I can't remember which. just over 7 years, I think, since you got the team, correct?
Summer 2013.
Okay, so almost 7 years. And this is coming at an interesting time in terms of the development of esports. We're in franchising now. The landscape's looking different. Why now? Why is now a good time to do this with Cloud9 as opposed to before? Did it require you to learn a lot about what was going well, what was going wrong with the team over the years, or what was the catalyst for you to really make a move on this as an organization?
I think we did the best we could with the knowledge we had, and I think we did really well with what we had for about 7 years.
I mean, your results were excellent, so I can't argue with that.
Finding Gary to really, I had a lot of what I wanted out of the culture of the team, but I didn't know exactly how to implement it in a way that I thought would be effective. And meeting Gary and talking with Gary about what I wanted and how he could help me do it it was really probably like a 5-6 months before we really started implementing it. And it had to be the end of Worlds was the right time to implement this pretty large culture change because I needed the players to buy in. I couldn't going into Worlds say, okay, we're gonna do everything differently. That just wasn't the right time to shift things. But as World was ending and I found which players wanted to be a part of this because several players opted out, that was the right time to make the change. And we're closing the chapter on the OG Cloud9, which was always a bit more relaxed than I really wanted them to be. I really enjoyed that part of our history, but for us to reach the goals where just getting to Worlds was no longer enough for me. I wanted to dominate here in our region as well as internationally. And the competition has been fierce the last few years. And I need a team that's willing to put in the effort and have the drive to beat out these other really good teams. And I now have those guys, and I have people like Gary to kind of crystallize the way our culture should be working. I've always had a fantastic coach in Reapbird, but Gary can give him additional tools to get the most out of his players. So it's like everything came together for us to build this team to be focused on daily improvement. And yeah, we're 4-0 right now. That wasn't our expectation. My expectation was that we'd be learning and getting better every single day. And that's where I'm most proud. That 4-0 honestly doesn't really matter to me at all, because it doesn't really mean anything. If we go 18-0 and we don't win North America, no one cares, right? It doesn't matter. So I need players that are every day coming in hungry to get better, to be a better teammate, to be a better player, and those accolades will come along the way. But I want that culture to be a culture not only for League of Legends but for all my teams, and I'm really excited that we took this first step to on this journey.
Well, it makes sense given what's been going on with all of Cloud9's divisions. Because if we take a step back and we talk about it, not only did the last original member of Cloud9 leave the team and Sneaky in League of Legends, but like we discussed earlier, you changed over the entire Counter-Strike roster.
Right.
You just signed a Dota roster. Yeah. London Spitfire went through a holistic rebuild and signed a bunch of new players and is almost entirely a different team than it was last year. Yeah. So these are all things that are happening within Cloud9 right now where you can hit the reset button.
Yeah. I think Spitfire's a really good example, and I'm glad you brought it up. I was thinking about, like, we should talk about that, but the very similar things that are going on with League of Legends are happening in Spitfire, where we have 12 really dedicated, hungry players that want to improve as a team as well as individually, and they're putting the team first. And I'm really excited to see what they can do when Overwatch League kicks off.
Yeah. I think really as a great example with Spitfire and so forth, but you know, to be really clear, you know, Cloud9 is, I think there's an obvious, you know, paradigm shift, but it really involves working on things that have been working well for Jack 7 years, and what's working well, and let's build on that, let's grow that. And there's so much that's working well for Cloud9, and then really how to optimize. This is to get to the next level. This is to get to the next step. And I think that's really different than being record focused. I think the idea is obviously you want to win, you want to get to that next level, but you really want to be at an organization that is in a sustained way successful. And the only way you can do that is you really love to grow, you love to keep learning, you love mastery, you really heighten or tighten up your training methods and so forth and bring some rigor to it. And I think that as Jack said, working with the coaches, working with the players, working with the managers, working with the system is the way to go. And it's going to keep us, not just get to the next level, but keep us as a sustained, you know, successful, optimized organization. You know, great organizations don't always win, but they're always in it, and they always stay great, and that's what we want to do. Yeah.
You mentioned Reapered, and one of the things about the London Spitfire rebuild was that you kept Agape throughout this entire process, who's the coach of the Spitfire. How important now are coaches, long-term coaches, to the infrastructure of Cloud9?
I mean, if you look at our history, it's critical to us. We double down on management and coaching staff. Without that strong core, everything else would fall apart and would be like, you know, dice roll on if the players actually click or not. And even if they are clicking, if you don't have good coaching and good support stuff, at some point it'll just fall apart and it's dust in the wind. But if you've got strong management and strong coaching staff with a clear vision on what they want, you can keep finding good, talented players and build them to the stars that you need. And it's much more long term.
I think Jack nailed it with you find the right coaching staff, the right training staff, if you will, who are receptive to inputs, receptive to growing, not just saying, give me more talent, but hey, it's on me to develop talent. And we've had coaches that have left, frankly, you know, more recently, and that meet that or don't meet that expectation. So that to me is really, it's an expectation culturally that you will be prepared as a coach and train. You will develop players, right? And you will model exactly what you want. And so I think Reaper's a great example of that, of just coaches that grow and are willing to grow, and coaches that are willing to engage. So I'm going to give you a lot, but I'm going to expect a lot. And that's a really powerful combination when people know that you really care about them and that you're confident in what you do, right? And you have the right character, those 3 C's. That's huge for what we call followership. So you have those things and you show up and you expect and you engage, then I'm going to realize I owe something back to you. And that's a really powerful ingredient, if you will, or powerful combination.
Are you, Gary, trying to add additional infrastructural staff? Have you noticed anything that Cloud9 needs that they don't have right now?
I'm not here to add anything with respect, is really to be a consultant. And in that sense, and to be engaged myself with players, I think you asked earlier about recruiting. I will tell you that, you know, anybody out there that wants to come to Cloud9, you're going to get resourced well, and that doesn't mean just contract. And what I really am speaking about the ability to be great, and that we're going to have a culture that from training, from staff, from resourcing to human performance to the right atmosphere that you need, the right context, you're going to get resourced well to be great. You want to be great, you want to grow as a player, you come here. And that's really, I don't think there's anything additive to that other than an owner who's setting that atmosphere. And Jack really sets the table for that. So,
yeah, people that are willing to initiate on building greatness, I will give them all the resources they need to achieve it. Like I'm not afraid to take risks. I'm not afraid to shake things up. Like if you want to make some amazing, funny, interesting content, I'm gonna resource it. If you want to hire some really smart data science people, I've hired a whole team. What do they want to work on? What cool tools can they build? Like my job is to make sure that great people have the resources they need to do great things. And I get really excited when people think big ideas, and I'm willing to take risks. As long as everyone is like kind of focused on how to make Cloud9, great and a better place, I'm all for it. I'm super excited.
And we haven't talked about that much, but I mean from a data, who's Jack, that's a perfect example of resourcing. Mm-hmm. So from a data analytics perspective, these aren't individuals who are reactive to what happened, like, oh, we lost here or we could have grown here. They are leaning forward on how we can get better, working in tandem with the coaches and with the players on their ability to understand their own tendencies, their abilities to be more predictive. That's a classic example of resourcing well. And so Cloud9 is really leaning forward on performance. That's terrific.
It's really exciting to watch, like, our data team, like, because they're watching every scrim, they're in the reviews with the players, and they're challenging coaches and challenging like players, like, what data can I provide that will actually help you make better decisions? And they don't just take that feedback and it just goes out into the ether. Like, they come back the next day like, I built this tool. What do you think about it? And it's really cool because we have partners like Microsoft, where we had a hackathon for like over 24 hours. We had over 100, some of the best engineers on the planet trying to come up with tools to help Cloud9 do better. And it was like shocking. I'm like, cool. Oh my God, the resources that we have at our disposal here at Cloud9 and with our partners is limitless. And so it's really exciting to watch these like brilliant people come up with cool tools to help our players be better.
Do you have any plans to get all of the players together at any point during the year? I know it's difficult with the schedule, but oftentimes in November or December is kind of like the off season for most esports. What are the plans to get everyone in the same place to kind of talk about the culture change or share ideas across these teams that may not always be together? Do you have plans for that?
It's tough because the schedules are very different. So we'll get groups and collections of guys together, but not all of them so far. But like we have overlap between Academy and the League of Legends and Counter-Strike when they're in town, or Rocket League's in town. They'll get to hang out and we'll talk about stuff. But having all of them together, it's kind of a scheduling nightmare that we're gonna have to try to figure out, because like in November, like, which could be a good time for getting the players together, our staff is like is going wild trying to figure out how can we lose the off season. We got to make sure that we lose it worse than we did last year. We can't just and it's going to be like 2020 off season's that's got to be a banger, because this 2019 is going to raise the bar on like how many pitchforks and flaming torches could be outside my window, because you guys you did a good job.
So no plans yet, but
no, it's something I do want to do, but it will be a scheduling difficulty, and and not even just the teams, but all, like, we have a lot of employees at Cloud9 trying to get everybody on the same page when we're all traveling around is tough. And like right now, what we do is we basically take it team by team and group by group within Cloud9 and have like culture workshops with them. And I would love to see more like cross team like discussions, because I think it could be really educational for like, you know, the Counter-Strike guys to be talking with the League guys about like, you know, their struggles and how they're getting through them. I've actually had like there's been a lot more of that overlap and sharing between our Overwatch team, Spitfire, and League of Legends. I know Reaper has gone out and talked with Agape about his experiences. Reaper was actually sitting in on a lot of Spitfire early scrims and kind of talking about how they get the best out of their team. So I think there is synergy being built between the teams and shared learning, but I'd love to see more of it.
That's a great point about kind of crosstalk, if you will, across the teams, and how even I know when I was in the military, we'd have you know, professional sports teams come and visit with the SEALs and so forth, and they both elite players, and they have different perspectives, but really augmenting, really helpful. And so I think that's a great exercise to do that across even same company but different teams. But I would say that we've been very iterative on doing culture talks, but strategic in the sense that we would do, here's what we're looking at from a cultural perspective to senior management or to all the coaches and the managers. So you don't always get to the players, but you get to the systems in play to then implement that within their respective teams. So Overwatch would be represented, so would League, so would Counter-Strike and so forth. So I think trying to be strategic in that way, and what you're discussing is clearly a logistical, I'd say a hurdle, but not undoable. But I love the idea of the crosstalk. That's a great point.
I've always thought it's very important, because the nice thing about having different pro esports teams together is that they understand each other's problems and they can help each other solve them. But even then, sometimes it's just a nice release, because you might be putting up with some bullshit from your teammate, but I can go talk to these guys about this issue, or, you know, blow off some steam because they understand my life as a pro gamer, but I'm not sharing in their unique problems that they have as a team, right? So I always think it's better to have more pro gamers together so that they understand each other's issues, but are not directly invested in the problems of a given team, and so it allows some breadth.
Yeah, I think it's a bit of it's tough because you know, these competitions are taking place across the world, and like different games and different ecosystems will have different locations that's best for those teams to actually be working in. So like obviously having Spitfire working out of LA wouldn't make sense when most of their games are like in Europe or on the East Coast. So they're located out there, and you know, and with similar with Rocket League, they want to be playing on the East Coast servers. So there is some like natural divides that are making it a little more difficult to do on a daily basis. But I would love to figure out a way to have them at least a few times a year meet up.
Now that we've talked about the clean break, setting up this company culture, what are the next steps for you, Gary?
I think honestly, next steps for me, it's one thing to talk about them, it's another to implement and to say, again, 4.0 or 0.4 wouldn't be good, but 4.0 is fine. But really, implementation means that the steps that we want to do from a training rigor, from a player's personal ownership of stuff, meaning that I show up ready. These are my individual goals. They're accountable to my coaches. So I really want to work on implementation. So by the end of the season, we are efficient. Culture is like the air we breathe. You don't notice it, but that's just what we do. That's who we are. And so I think that's a process. And again, if you asked me a year from now, I said, well, where are we? I'd say probably similar answer. We're continuing to implement and grow and develop, and we love it. We love getting better. And so to me, that I think working on our implementation methods as a team, and also just some individual stuff. I think there's lots of room to grow individually by players. And so my ability to get some time with each of them and work on their own performance optimization is a key. So
this is why I love having Gary here, because like I've had teams be 4-0. I've had teams win championships, and historically, it's funny, but my biggest fear has always been when a team wins a world championship, because then the passion goes away and I'm terrified. I've got this this complacency scares the crap out of me. And so when I see us go 4-0, I start going, oh God. stay humble, boys. Like just keep working, keep the nose down. Maybe we need a loss, just to kind of get them on the right track. But Gary has just told me, like, don't worry, we're focused on the process. These guys aren't, they're, this is a different breed of team. We're doing something different, and I hear it, but then I see it. That, like, I walked into this house last night, around 10 p.m. or so, and the academy team and the league team are sitting around the table together playing Avalon, like really truly enjoying each other's company. They could be just grinding out solo queue, which is valuable too, but it's also valuable to take a mental break and play with your teammates in a really constructive, healthy way. And it gives me great comfort knowing I have really, qualified people that can help, change this culture so that the guys don't lose focus on what we're doing.
Mm-hmm. And I think you have a team with a shared identity, so that's why you grow your team vision. So Jack was kind of alluded to complacency, but in reality, what does that mean? I mean, I don't care where we're at. I know that I owe each of my teammates, and we have a shared vision of probably way beyond North America. We want to not just be in our region, we want to grow, and we want to be on a global stage. That's a long way off. We're not even close to there. I could care less what our record is. Mm-hmm. And so people that are hungry and driven and feel a sense of ownership. I own what my behaviors are. I owe my teammates. They expect. We're professionals. That's really powerful. That's compelling. And if you study great organizations that stay great, that's what coaches and training staff and ownership, that's what they demand. And they don't demand because you have to do it, but they do it, so why don't you do it? So we're working hard on our staff in that sense. So,
to conclude, Jack, what would you say to a hopeful pro gamer about what does it now take to be on Cloud9? What are you looking for? How does somebody get to be part of your team?
It's a combination of, you need to be able to click buttons well, right? You have to be, that's a requirement, right? Yeah, but just because you could click buttons really well and be the top of the solo queue ladder, you need to understand that when you step into Cloud9, it's not about what Cloud9 could do for you, it's what you can do for your teammates and for Cloud9 to help the team win. And if that means that, you go 0-5 that game, but your team is winning, you do it, and you're happy to do it. And it's not just checking the box saying it, you have to mean it, and if you don't actually, if that doesn't drive you, you shouldn't be here. And I don't ever, Cloud9, I think at this point has proven we're not going to hold players because I have a contract. Any player that wants to opt out and say, hey, this isn't for me anymore, I get you onto the best team possible. I say thank you for your time at Cloud9. I really appreciate it. And thank you for telling me this isn't the place for you. And we're going to go find someone that actually wants to be here and build with us.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for all the insight. It's very important, I think, that this discussion happens now because a lot of fans have been like, oh no, what's happening with the league team? What's happening with the Counter-Strike team? What's happening with Spitfire? Why are all these changes being taken right now? And it's a very, I think, important moment in Cloud9's history where a lot's changing and there's going to be a new vision going forward. So I think the fans will be grateful to have your explanation. So thanks a lot.